Go.
Well, good afternoon, Frank.
Hi, Professor Spooner. How are you?
Okay, the news this past week has been dominated by two things. One, I'll do it from the bottom up, Syria, and various things that are going on internationally about Western interference in the Syrian situation, and the fact that a lot of people think the West has to do something and it's not doing anything. Partly because, of course, there are two sides and they disagree about what should be done. But more than that, everybody's been preoccupied with the presidential campaign in the United States. And the most interesting thing that's been said about that, I think, was by Gideon Rachman in the Financial Times, who had a very interesting article a couple of days ago to the effect that this is, I can't remember what his exact words were, and they probably weren't quite as bad as what I'm going to say. This is the end of global democracy.
It could be if one person wins.
Well, it's very interesting that that the same thing should be, well, not exactly the same thing, but similar. There are similar problems in several democracies. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Corbyn problem in England is a similar problem in that he's by no means an ideal leader for an opposition party or for any party, and he wouldn't be the leader if a lot of people hadn't decided to join in the election who wouldn't have joined in the election earlier. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly the way that I always thought before that democracy is an idea that we got from the Greeks. Nobody quite knows how it worked among the Greeks. It certainly didn't work quite the way it works here now. We started trying to make it the Western system before the end of the 17th century. It was a very slow process, and as long as everybody didn't participate, it worked quite well. But then in the middle of the 20th century, a number of people started to think that, and to campaign to the effect that everybody should be able to participate. And it continued to work fairly well because even though other people started to participate, they didn't actually play a part in making the decisions. Mm-hmm. But now, because of the continuing progress of globalization and the increasing expansion of the arenas within which people interact with each other, and the general rise in the social awareness of even people who have very little knowledge of the rest of the world, they're all playing a part. And so people who don't know what they're talking about now have an equal voice with people who do know what they're talking about.
Well,
has a big effect on the way democracy works.
Well, I would submit that the expansion of democracy since the time of the ancient Athenians to where it is today is probably directly traceable by if you looked at the path of globalization from back then to today, I think you'd be able to almost draw a straight line correlation to the expansion of democracy. Because certainly the ancient Greeks, I mean, the slaves in Athens did not vote. I don't think women voted. I think only landholders voted. And there were very few of them in comparison to the overall population of the people in Athens. And then, of course, as it's gone through generations, I mean, for many, many, many years, only property owners could vote. I mean, for many years, people couldn't vote. There were kings, and then property owners could vote. And then it wasn't until relatively recently that women could vote. And then now, of course, you've imbued the word democracy with the same connotations as people think of liberty, freedom, freedom to worship, freedom to love. I mean, it's democracy. It's right there in that same pantheon of must-haves. But it's an imperfect system. It always has been an imperfect system. And now I think if you look at the situation that we've arrived at, where everybody can have a voice and everybody has a vote, it's not a surprise that we're facing what we're facing.
No, and it's particularly interesting that now is the time that we're getting into this critical, what I've been calling the crucial phase in this as well as other things, that I think that the way globalization is changing the world it's forcing us to rethink everything we do, simply because all our institutions were designed for a certain size of participation, certain, what shall I say, degree
Level
of participation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as the number of participants in any institutionalized process increases, it works differently. And I think I may have said before that so far the only position of any sort of authority at all that's above the level of the nation state is the Pope.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and we've been hopeless at developing anything that's transnational that works at all, and that didn't matter so much when the nation state worked, but the nation state is beginning to run into problems.
I think I think the criticality of this crucial phase that you're talking about, I think is going to manifest itself in electoral results. I think we've begun to see that with the Brexit vote and the ensuing problems that are now being faced by the British politicians. And I think that it's going to be manifested in the United States as well, regardless of who wins. Because if the Democrats win, those people who vote for the Republican are not going to go away. He's certainly going to capitalize on his notoriety and almost form an exile kind of government that is, in addition to being a moneymaker for him, is going to make an awful lot of noise and also attract a lot of disaffected people. So I don't know that we're at the transnational institution stage yet, but I certainly think we're reaching a point of criticality.
It's very difficult to see what might happen after November the 8th with the remaining 2.5 months of Obama sitting in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
In preparation, while the others prepare to take over at the end of January. It could be an entirely Democratic majority, and it could be split again.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever it is, one gets the impression now that the people who lose won't accept the loss,
mm-hmm.
at least not quietly.
Not quietly, that's for sure. Let me ask a question. Go back to the Syrian issue. Of course, John Kerry is going to be in Lausanne, I think, tomorrow, meeting with the Russians as well as other people. I think at the invitation of the Russian foreign minister, if I'm not mistaken. So this is going to be yet another attempt to do what? To stop the indiscriminate bombing of civilians?
I don't really see what the Americans can do because they can't fight Russia in Syria. And if Russia doesn't agree with them, I feel that their participation in Syria is not going to make things any better. It's more likely to make things worse.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And even if we could come to an agreement with the Russians, it would be difficult to work out what the agreement should be an agreement on.
Yes.
Because the problems in Syria are the result of putting a nation-state government in charge of the population that has lived in Syria since before the British and the French made it a nation-state.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really not possible to make it into a democratic nation-state on the same that would work in the same way that we expect nation-states to work. And the reason it's worked so far, from 1921 to 2011, is simply that people put up with it, and the Western powers were supporting the dictator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And that's what Russia wants to continue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it won't work anymore.
No, it won't work.
Unless the current dictator is able to annihilate everybody who disagrees with him.
Mm-hmm. It's yet again another example of not only the imperfection of democracy, but nevertheless the unwillingness or inability of other democracies to recognize that there are in fact other types of governing systems that exist that might be more suitable for those countries. Now, if I was a minority, a non-Alawite in Syria, I would undoubtedly be quite upset about the way I've been being treated by the Assad regime over 2 generations now. But nevertheless, I would have experienced peace. I would have experienced prosperity. I would have experienced order.
Yeah, I think the only way I can see to solve the current problems is for somebody to work out a way of giving each of the different political communities in Syria a piece of territory of their own, and then putting together some sort of federation among them.
That's not going to happen as long as Assad is alive.
But I don't know who would have the ability to do that, because it's difficult to find an academic at the moment who understands that. I mean, the people who were good experts on Syria, unfortunately, have left us over the last decade.
Let me ask you another question, if I may, if you're willing to talk about it. I know where you just came from just now. Is there anything that you can share with us that might be of interest in the framework of what we discussed?
The new Bolton Center?
Yes.
Well, we're trying to put together a new version of a course which deals with problems of global food security.
Okay.
And we're trying to deal with all the criticisms we got from students last time we did it. And the problem is that it's such a complex problem that you can't fit it all into one course.
No, I mean, it's not.
And we want to redesign it in such a way that we spend part of the course explaining how we got to where we are now, and then the rest of the course dealing with the problems of how we're going to continue to feed a population that is going to continue to increase up to at least 10 billion, and continuing to urbanize so that the supply problem becomes more difficult as well. We can't possibly do that all in one semester in 3 hours a week.
No, you can't.
So we're dividing it into 2, and we're trying to work out a way to make it into 2 separate but nevertheless independent courses.
Ah, all right. And the new Bolton Center, of course, is the University of Pennsylvania's Veterinary Medicine Center?
Yeah.
Okay, for those who don't know.
Because they deal with the agricultural side of it, but most especially, of course, with meat production and milk production. But they do it in India and China as well as in the Western world.
Okay. Okay.
So
very interesting.
They have very interesting things to say about the way that a vegetarian menu, the production of foods for a vegetarian menu, gain from the production of meat. The 2 processes are very closely interrelated.
I never would have known that. All right. Well, we'll have to talk about that, because famine is in the news today. Right now, there's a huge food crisis burgeoning in Nigeria that not many people are aware of. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Crises in other places as well, but yes. In other places it's actually a result of different sorts of problems.
Well, Brian, thank you very much. I look forward to next week.
Good, and I too.